You're tuned in to 22 Crime, where the truth hides in the details. Together we dive into the darkest corners of human nature, exploring the mysteries that have left investigators puzzled and families searching for justice. Because in the world of crime, the truth is never as simple as it seems. In 2010, a man named Larry Ray, freshly released from prison, entered the idyllic world of Sarah Lawrence University. This institution, renowned for its liberal arts education and progressive ethos, was an unlikely backdrop for what was about to unfold. Larry wasn't just another visitor, he was the father of a student, Talia Ray, and he made himself at home in her dorm room. What seemed at first like an eccentric parental intrusion soon spiraled into a story of manipulation, exploitation, and unspeakable abuse. Picture this. A serene college campus where ancient trees shade walkways, laughter fills the air, and the future seems bright for its young students. But beneath this picturesque setting, a darkness was brewing. Over the next decade, Larry Ray ensnared Talia's friends in a web of psychological torment, financial extortion, and physical abuse. He positioned himself as a mentor and protector, but in reality, he was the architect of a deeply disturbing scheme that would ruin lives and shock the nation. This is not just the story of one man's manipulative tactics, it's a cautionary tale about vulnerability, trust, and the devastating consequences of unchecked power. The clock is ticking, let's uncover the truth behind today's mystery. Viewer discretion is advised. 22 is a true crime podcast that delves into real-life crime stories, which often involve graphic descriptions, sensitive content, and strong language that may not be suitable for all audiences. We strive to present these cases with the utmost respect for the victims and their families. Please note that the content discussed may be distressing or triggering for some listeners. Additionally, all resources and information presented in this podcast are obtained from publicly available internet sources. Listener discretion is strongly advised, and we recommend that only mature audiences proceed with caution. If you are sensitive to such content, please consider watching another video. Stay safe and take care of your mental health. It was 2010, and the serene campus of Sarah Lawrence University, nestled just north of New York City, hummed with the usual vibrancy of collegiate life. Known for its liberal arts excellence and progressive ideals, the university was a sanctuary of creativity and ambition. Students spent their days navigating rigorous coursework and their evenings sharing dreams and laughter under the towering trees of this picturesque setting. Into this idyllic world stepped Larry Ray, a man freshly released from prison. He wasn't a student, nor a faculty member, but the father of Talia Ray, a charismatic art major entering her second year. Larry moved into Talia's dorm under the guise of needing temporary housing. While his presence raised some eyebrows, it wasn't unusual for the close-knit community to welcome outsiders with an open heart. What began as a seemingly eccentric parental visit soon turned into something far more sinister. Larry was no ordinary father. Behind his magnetic charm lay a master manipulator, skilled in exploiting vulnerability and trust. In the months and years that followed, Larry would embed himself into the lives of Talia's friends, weaving an intricate web of psychological control, coercion, and abuse. At first, Larry appeared generous, offering advice, cooking meals, and presenting himself as a protector to these young adults far from home. But as his influence grew, so did the darkness. By the time his true intentions were clear, the damage had already been done. Lives would be forever altered, dreams shattered, and a prestigious university's reputation tainted by one man's insidious actions. This story isn't just about Larry Ray, it's a haunting reminder of how manipulation can thrive in the most unexpected places. Buckle up, because this journey into the shadows of Sarah Lawrence University is as harrowing as it is cautionary. To understand how Larry Ray infiltrated the lives of Sarah Lawrence University students, we must first delve into his past, a past steeped in manipulation, deceit, and a relentless hunger for control. Larry Ray was born in 1959 in New York City's Borough Park neighborhood, but little is known about his early years. What is clear is that from a young age, Larry had a knack for persuasion, often using his charm to navigate the complexities of life. This talent for manipulation would become the foundation of his criminal endeavors. In the 1980s, Larry ventured into the high-stakes world of Wall Street, despite lacking formal qualifications. He secured positions in insurance and construction, industries where his persuasive skills proved invaluable. But Larry's success came at a price. His methods were as unscrupulous as they were effective. By the early 2000s, his ventures had caught up with him, culminating in charges of stock market fraud. Larry wasn't just a participant in the schemes. He was deeply entrenched, even serving as an informant for law enforcement at one point. However, this too unraveled when it was discovered that he was implicated in the very crimes he was supposedly helping to expose. Larry's personal life was equally turbulent. He married Teresa, with whom he had 2 daughters, Talia and Ava. But the marriage was marked by conflict, allegations of abuse, and a bitter divorce. Larry portrayed himself as a devoted father battling an abusive ex-wife, painting a picture of heroism to anyone who would listen. His daughters, particularly Talia, were drawn into his narrative, with Larry manipulating their loyalties to maintain control. By the time Larry entered Sarah Lawrence University in 2010, he was a man hardened by years of scheming and exploitation. Fresh out of prison, he carried with him not only a criminal record but also the psychological tools of a master manipulator. His relationship with Talia, rooted in years of shared struggle against perceived enemies, became the gateway through which he infiltrated the lives of her unsuspecting friends. Larry Ray was no ordinary man. He was a calculated opportunist, armed with a lifetime of experience in bending others to his will. And for the students of Sarah Lawrence, his arrival would mark the beginning of a nightmare they could never have imagined: establishing control. Larry Ray's arrival at Sarah Lawrence University wasn't a grand entrance, it was a quiet infiltration. Initially, he was just Talia's father, crashing in her dorm room on campus, but Larry's presence quickly grew from unusual to unsettling. With the charm of a seasoned manipulator, he began to weave himself into the fabric of Talia's social circle, winning over her friends with calculated charisma and feigned benevolence. Larry positioned himself as a mentor and guide, someone who could offer wisdom and support to the young, impressionable students far from home. He cooked for them, cleaned their shared spaces, and introduced them to a lifestyle that seemed both caring and indulgent. Expensive dinners, thoughtful gestures, and endless attention painted him as a doting father figure who genuinely cared about their well-being. But Larry wasn't just offering kindness, he was meticulously laying the groundwork for control. He began holding impromptu therapy sessions, claiming his life experience and connections with powerful institutions like the FBI and CIA gave him unique insight into their struggles. These sessions were not therapeutic. They were opportunities for Larry to pry into the students' personal lives, uncovering their deepest fears and insecurities. He presented himself as the only person who could truly understand them, offering solutions to their problems in exchange for their trust. Slowly but surely, Larry isolated his targets. He exploited their vulnerabilities, whether it was a recent heartbreak, family troubles, or feelings of inadequacy, and reframed their issues as problems only he could solve. As the students grew more dependent on his guidance, he began to blur the lines between mentor and master. His advice turned into commands, his generosity became leverage, and his charm masked the subtle tightening of his control over their lives. By the time the students realized the extent of his influence, they were already caught in his web. Larry had ingrained himself into their lives so deeply that challenging his authority felt impossible. What began as a seemingly harmless visit by a father to his daughter's dorm had morphed into a chilling tale of psychological manipulation and control. As Larry Ray's control over his followers deepened, the environment he fostered became increasingly suffocating. The transition from the sprawling tree-lined campus of Sarah Lawrence University to a cramped Manhattan apartment marked a turning point. What had started as a pseudo-communal living arrangement spiraled into a nightmarish regime of control, manipulation, and relentless exploitation. The move was framed as a necessary step for the group's growth. Larry described the apartment as a place of transformation, a sanctuary where they could focus on their personal development. In reality, it became a prison, both physically and psychologically. Larry isolated the group from their families and the outside world, enforcing strict rules about contact with anyone outside their tight-knit circle. Phone calls were monitored, emails were scrutinized, and any attempt to reconnect with loved ones was met with accusations of disloyalty. Inside the apartment, Larry established a grueling routine designed to break down the group's mental and physical resilience. Days began at dawn, often with loud music blasting through the tiny space to jolt everyone awake. Sleep deprivation became a weapon, leaving the students too exhausted to think critically or resist his demands. He imposed harsh labor under the guise of therapeutic tasks, such as renovating the apartment without proper tools or skills, work that left the space in worse condition and the students even more demoralized. Financial exploitation soon followed. Larry accused the group of owing him for his mentorship, manipulating them into handing over money or, in some cases, indebting themselves further to meet his demands. One by one, he drained their savings, coerced them into asking family members for funds, and, in the most extreme cases, forced them into activities that crossed legal and moral boundaries to earn money for him. Under Larry's relentless control, the apartment became a crucible of suffering. Each follower was subjected to public shaming and therapy sessions that masqueraded as interventions but were, in fact, carefully orchestrated spectacles designed to humiliate and isolate. The group was pitted against one another, with Larry fostering jealousy and mistrust to maintain his dominance. His manipulative tactics created an atmosphere of paranoia, where loyalty to him meant survival. This stage of Larry's operation demonstrated the full extent of his predatory methods. The students were no longer individuals, they were pawns in Larry's meticulously crafted game, existing solely to satisfy his insatiable appetite for power, control, and financial gain. As Larry's Ray's grip tightened, the abuse inflicted on his followers escalated to harrowing levels, crossing boundaries of the physical, psychological, and even sexual. What began as subtle manipulation morphed into outright cruelty, with Larry employing calculated tactics to ensure his dominance remained unchallenged. Larry mastered the art of divide and conquer, exploiting insecurities and creating rifts within the group. He cultivated an atmosphere of distrust, ensuring his followers were too suspicious of one another to unite against him. Public humiliation became a cornerstone of his control. During his infamous therapy sessions, he singled out individuals, forcing them to confess to fabricated wrongdoings. These confessions were then used as ammunition to further isolate and dominate them. Santos, once a bright and spirited young man, became one of Larry's primary targets. Larry subjected him to relentless physical abuse, including surprise strangulation holds designed to knock him unconscious. These attacks weren't just acts of violence, they were theatrical displays of power, intended to show others that resistance was futile. In one particularly horrifying incident, Larry struck Santos with a hammer and then threatened to mutilate him with a knife. The final straw came when Larry forced Santos to wear a diaper as a form of humiliation, shattering any remaining sense of dignity. This act of degradation drove Santos to distance himself from the group, though the scars of the experience would haunt him long after. Daniel Levin, another follower, faced similar torment. Larry's control over Daniel began with psychological manipulation, exploiting Daniel's doubts about his sexuality. What should have been a safe space for self-discovery became a battlefield of shame and coercion. In one chilling episode, Larry forced Daniel to wear a dress and humiliate himself in the common areas of their building. Larry didn't stop there. He escalated to physical violence, crafting crude torture devices and using them to inflict pain. The breaking point for Daniel came when Larry ordered him to perform a degrading act in front of the group. Humiliated and broken, Daniel finally left, refusing to answer Larry's calls ever again. The abuse wasn't confined to physical and psychological torment, it extended to sexual exploitation as well. Larry manipulated his followers into intimate acts under the guise of opening their minds and breaking free from societal norms. Relationships within the group were orchestrated by Larry, reducing deeply personal connections to tools of control and humiliation. The line between consent and coercion blurred as Larry used intimacy as another weapon in his arsenal. By fostering fear, dependency, and shame, Larry transformed his followers into shadows of their former selves. The escalation of abuse wasn't just a method to maintain control, it was a deliberate act to strip these individuals of their autonomy and humanity, ensuring that Larry's word was the only truth they believed. Larry Ray's appetite for control extended beyond the psychological and physical realms. He also sought to dominate the financial and sexual lives of his followers. Under the guise of life coaching and guidance, Larry manipulated these young individuals into funding his extravagant lifestyle, bleeding them and their families dry in the process. Claudia Drury, a bright and creative young woman, became one of Larry's primary targets. Initially resistant to his methods, she eventually succumbed to his manipulative tactics. Larry convinced Claudia that she needed to atone for imagined flaws and debts. He framed this atonement as a path to personal growth and redemption, but it came at an unimaginable cost. Over 4 years, Larry coerced Claudia into engaging in paid relationships, forcing her to hand over every cent of her earnings. The profits from this exploitation were staggering, reportedly exceeding $2.5 million, all of which lined Larry's pockets while Claudia saw none of it. Larry didn't stop there. He involved other followers in financial schemes that placed crushing burdens on their families. Santos, one of Larry's earliest recruits, was driven to desperation under Larry's control. At Larry's command, he begged his parents for money, threatening self-harm if they refused. His family, terrified for their son's safety, sacrificed everything, selling their home and depleting their savings to provide the funds Larry demanded. Over time, the financial toll on Santos's family exceeded $200,000, leaving them emotionally and financially devastated. Larry's manipulation of sexual relationships within the group was equally insidious. He positioned himself as the ultimate authority on intimacy, encouraging followers to engage in relationships with one another or strangers as acts of self-discovery. These directives were not born of care or guidance, but of control and humiliation. Larry often orchestrated these interactions, watching or joining in to further degrade and dehumanize his followers. For Claudia, the exploitation reached its zenith when Larry imposed surveillance on her, installing cameras in her home to ensure compliance. He framed this violation as a measure of protection, another twisted manipulation to maintain his hold on her life. Through these calculated acts, Larry Ray didn't just rob his followers of their money, he stripped them of their autonomy, reducing their lives to tools for his pleasure and gain. His actions left behind a trail of financial ruin, emotional devastation, and deep-seated trauma that his victims would carry for years to come. For years, Larry Ray maintained an iron grip over his followers, controlling every facet of their lives. But, as with many stories of abuse and manipulation, his reign of terror eventually began to crumble. The cracks in Larry's seemingly unshakable influence started to form when some of his victims found the strength to resist, culminating in a daring escape that exposed his horrors to the world. Claudia Drury, one of Larry's most loyal and exploited followers, was among the first to break free. By 2018, after enduring years of psychological abuse, physical degradation, and financial exploitation, Claudia reached a breaking point. In a moment of despair and clarity, she confided in one of her clients, detailing the extent of Larry's control and the torment she had suffered. The client, horrified by her revelations, offered to help her escape, providing her with money for a train ticket out of New York. Though Claudia managed to leave, Larry was not about to let her go so easily. He tracked her down, luring her to a Manhattan hotel under the pretense of reconciliation. What followed was a harrowing ordeal. Larry restrained Claudia, subjected her to humiliating and violent torture, and used waterboarding, a method designed to induce fear and submission. But despite this brutal retaliation, Claudia's escape planted a seed of defiance that would grow in others. Claudia's confessions, once she finally broke free for good, became a catalyst for the unraveling of Larry's empire. Her accounts reached the ears of law enforcement and journalists, eventually sparking the investigative article in New York Magazine in 2019. The story laid bare the atrocities Larry had committed and the psychological grip he held over his victims. The publication of the article marked a turning point. It drew the attention of the FBI, who began to piece together a case against him. The exposure emboldened other victims to distance themselves from Larry and, in some cases, come forward with their own experiences. Followers who had once believed they were powerless against Larry's manipulation started to see him for what he truly was, a predator hiding behind charisma and lies. In February 2020, the FBI raided Larry's home, armed with the testimonies of his victims and the evidence gathered from his meticulous records of abuse. The collapse of Larry's influence wasn't just the result of law enforcement intervention, it was the courage of individuals like Claudia, who, despite immense fear and trauma, took the first steps to reclaim their lives and expose the truth. Their bravery ultimately shattered Larry's control and brought his years of manipulation to an end. The unraveling of Larry Ray's reign of terror reached its climax in February 2020. The New York Magazine article published in 2018 had sparked widespread outrage, catching the attention of the FBI. The details were chilling. Accounts of psychological torment, coerced labor, financial extortion, and heinous physical abuse. The article became the catalyst for a full-scale federal investigation as agents meticulously pieced together the evidence from victims' testimonies, financial records, and Larry's own damning recordings. On February 11, 2020, the FBI raided Larry's residence in Piscataway, New Jersey. What they found was staggering. Meticulously kept account books documenting the millions of dollars extorted from his victims, explicit videos used as tools of blackmail, and other incriminating materials. The operation culminated in Larry's arrest on 15 federal charges, including extortion, forced labor, sex trafficking, money laundering, and tax evasion. The trial, which began in 2022, became a horrifying showcase of the depth of Larry's manipulative tactics and the suffering he inflicted. Witness after witness recounted the chilling methods he used to control them: sleep deprivation, verbal and physical abuse, and relentless psychological warfare. Claudia Drury's testimony stood out as particularly harrowing, detailing how Larry forced her into sex work and took the entirety of her earnings, over $2.5 million during her years under his control. Prosecutors argued that Larry Ray operated like a cult leader, systematically dismantling the autonomy of his victims and exploiting their vulnerabilities. The defense tried to paint Larry as a misunderstood father figure, but the evidence was overwhelming. Videos and documents from the FBI raid painted a stark picture of a man who thrived on dominance and control. In January 2023, Larry Ray was convicted on all counts. The judge delivered a scathing rebuke of his actions, calling him a predator of the highest order. He was sentenced to 60 years in prison, a sentence that ensures he will likely die behind bars. At the age of 63 at sentencing, Larry would need to live to 123 to see freedom again. The fallout didn't end with Larry. His closest associate, Isabella Pollack, who had been manipulated into becoming his right-hand enforcer, was also tried and convicted. In February 2023, she received a 5-year prison sentence for her role in laundering money and aiding Larry's schemes. Prosecutors acknowledged her own victimization under Larry's control, but held her accountable for her actions. Talia Ray, Larry's daughter, who initially brought him into the Sarah Lawrence University community, faced scrutiny but was ultimately not charged. Prosecutors recognized that she had been under her father's influence since childhood, a victim of his manipulation herself. For Larry's victims, the legal proceedings brought a measure of justice but not closure. The scars left by his manipulation, abuse, and betrayal would take years to heal. Some, like Daniel Levin, turned their pain into art, sharing their stories in memoirs and interviews. Others, like Claudia Drury and Felicia Rosario, sought to rebuild their lives away from the public eye, their bravery a testament to the strength it took to confront a predator like Larry Ray. Larry's conviction marked the end of his terror, but it also served as a stark reminder of the devastating power of manipulation and the importance of vigilance against predators who exploit trust and vulnerability. In the wake of Larry Ray's arrest, the tight-knit group he once controlled began to find their footing again, though the road to recovery would be long and arduous. Many of his victims had been estranged from family and friends, and for some, rebuilding those bonds proved overwhelming. Yet, in the midst of trauma, rays of hope emerged as survivors rediscovered their identities outside the shadow of Larry's manipulation. Some, like Daniel Levin, channeled their experiences into creative endeavors, using writing as a way to reclaim their narratives and shed light on the insidious nature of abuse. Others, like Claudia Drury, sought to piece their lives back together in private, away from the media spotlight. Each survivor had a unique path to healing, united only by the profound betrayal they endured and the resolve to move forward. For Sarah Lawrence University, the scandal brought into question the oversight and responsibility an institution holds toward its students. Former classmates and faculty, once oblivious to the dark undercurrents within their midst, were forced to reckon with the dangers that can lie just beyond a campus's well-tended lawns. Some argue that the university should have intervened when rumors first swirled of a middle-aged man living among sophomores, while others pointed out that the students were adults, each with their own autonomy. Beyond the campus, the Larry Ray case became a cautionary tale about the vulnerability of young adults and the power a skilled manipulator can wield. Advocates pointed to the importance of open communication, mental health support, and an environment where concerns can be raised without fear of ridicule or dismissal. Meanwhile, the harrowing details of Larry's abuse served as a stark reminder that extreme coercion and psychological control are not relics of remote cults or far-flung communes. They can flourish even in our most esteemed institutions when no one is paying attention. In the end, Larry Ray left behind more than a collection of shattered trust and financial devastation. He exposed how fragile and easily exploited human connections can be. Yet in doing so, he also revealed the resilience of those who broke free. Their stories are a testament to survival, a reminder that even the most entrenched manipulation can unravel when just one person dares to stand up and say, "No more." Thank you so much for listening all the way through. If you've made it to this point, drop a comment with the word "done," and we'll give you a personal shout-out to show our appreciation. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive in this murder and media frenzy. It was as fascinating for us to create as we hope it was for you to hear. If you found this episode thought-provoking, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We also invite you to join our YouTube channel, where you can get early access to our content, have your questions answered directly, and enjoy exclusive members-only content. We'd love to know what you think about this case. Was justice truly served? Share your opinions in the comments below. We're always eager to hear your thoughts. For those wanting to explore more on true crime, we've included Amazon affiliate links to some of the books we referenced in our researches. Purchasing through the link won't cost you anything extra, but it will support the channel and help us continue bringing you more content. If you're craving even more, consider joining our Patreon community. As a member, you'll get access to the full script of this episode, exclusive book summaries, and even the complete set of images featured in this case, available for purchase in our Patreon store. This has been 22 Crime. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.